Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Royal Photographic Society and this latest in the series of talks from recent award recipients. It's my pleasure this evening to hand over to the RPS's awards manager, Joe McDonald, who will introduce our two speakers this evening. Joe, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to tonight's conversation. Carly Clarke is a British documentary and portrait photographer. Her work focuses on social issues which may otherwise go unnoticed. Carly received the Society's Vic Odden Award last year. Stephen Lovell-Davis is a freelance photographer who started his career photographing bands at gigs. He has been published in many magazines, including Vogue, The Independent magazine, The Guardian, and The Sunday Times. Our next conversation will be between two honorary fellows, Jarmu X and Ingrid Pollard, on Wednesday, the 20th of September. Over to you, Carly and Stephen.
Hello. Now, I don't know whether I've got my view right here, have I?
Yeah, me too. Hello, everybody.
Hi, everybody. How can, yes, it's speaker I want, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, yes, well, Carly and I have known each other for quite a while, since 2010, when I actually taught you on a project in your first year at Middlesex University. It was a black and white project, and I think it's fair to say it didn't go that well. I was I think I was highly critical of the work, but and then I didn't teach you further in the on the course, and you got ill, and but I remember a colleague talking to me about your project, Reality Trauma, which we will be looking at shortly, and saying how impressive it was, and I also was impressed. We lost touch obviously after you finished the course, but we met up again a few years ago at a photography exhibition, and we've stayed in touch ever since. And yeah. I know your work pretty well.
Yes, you do. Thank you for inviting me to this talk. Thank you, Steve. Let me share my screen here.
I mean, you have your work. Have you always been interested in photography? I think it's worth giving it a bit of background as to, you know, how you came to photography in a way.
Yes. Sorry, let me just so I hadn't always been interested in photography. I started out in arts, drawing, painting when I was much younger. And I hadn't really tried any sort of photography until I went to Lewis College, and it was at that point that I discovered the dark room, and then I found that I couldn't keep out of the dark room. I was always in there until about 10 o'clock at night, and yeah, and that's where my love of photography really started at that point.
But you also did some acting, didn't you, there when you were...
I did, yeah.
I was thinking about that.
Yeah, so I was massively into acting on stage, and I actually applied to go to drama school, and I got into drama school, but I put that on hold, and I ended up going to Canada for a year to, you know, do a gap year. And I ended up working there because I couldn't afford just to go on a holiday. So it was more like a working, you know, holiday to get some experience. And I ended up working in the film industry, which was, I didn't think it would be that easy to do, but it turned out that Vancouver is like a mini Hollywood. So that's when I started getting into acting there and extra work. And I sort of discovered that although I knew that I wanted to go into acting, I didn't really enjoy it as much as I thought.
But you also tried to do a photography course there in Vancouver as well, didn't
Yeah,
you?
so after a while, so I'd been on a couple of movies, doing some extra work for
Well, let's hear a little bit about that then.
So yeah, the Fantastic Four, and the L Word I did some work with, and also Three Moons Over Milford. I did a whole bunch of different TV series and films, and
Okay.
yeah, so it's very interesting. I had some really interesting opportunities when I was there. But behind the scenes, when I got to know some of the actors and the directors, I just felt like it was a very difficult life to be part of,
Yeah.
being in and out of work all the time. And
Well, and so you became a photographer. I have to say, as a freelance for my whole life,
yeah,
that's the poor choice. But yeah, okay. And so then you applied for this course there in photography course in Vancouver.
Yeah. So I applied for Emily Carr, which is quite a famous art school in Canada, and I got onto the photography course there. So this was quite a while ago now. This was back in 2007. So I knew at that point that I wanted to go into photography and explore it further. But then the international fees were a bit expensive. So I knew that wasn't really an option for me.
Right.
So I went back to England, and to cut a long story short, I changed my course several times, which was a bit bad of me, but I ended up on the right course eventually, which was then to study photography at Middlesex.
Right. And then, so, I mean, the acting and photography, do you come from a kind of an arty family? Is there a history?
No, not really. So my dad was always playing guitar around the house when we were kids, and I come from a very creative family, but not, arty background so much. But yeah, my dad, he's a painter and decorator. He's self-employed, and and my mom, she didn't really work very much. I mean, it was
just
full-time mum, really, bringing up all of us kids. So
exactly, there's a few of you to bring up for her.
Yeah. There's 4 younger brothers, so yeah.
But so then you went back to Vancouver,
Yes,
to do a project when you were at university.
Yeah, so I went back to Vancouver because when I lived there, one of the things that always struck me about being there was that the Vancouver's downtown east side is it was such a shocking place for me to see when I went there. And I ended up living in a part of the area, and I couldn't believe how much homelessness and drug addiction and mental health issues there were in such a densely populated area. And other parts of the city are very well-to-do and completely different to this. And I'd never seen anything like it before. So it always stayed with me. I always thought, I really want to go back and find out why this has happened in this great city, but why are they all together in this one place? And so I decided that I researched massively before I went out and about addiction and everything. And I'd always had a big interest in the subject. So I really wanted to spend time with these people on the streets and to get to know them and tell their story from their perspective.
Yeah.
Really important to me. And I really wanted to understand. So
that's this project, right?
Yes, this is this project here. So this is Christine here. She was a prostitute on the streets, and she had massive drug issues and was also homeless. And so I spent a lot of time with her, like I did with a lot of people that I met. And there are also positive stories as well as negative.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there's one of those that you're going to show in a minute, isn't there? The thing I like this guy. This is. Can you just tell us about the dog's name?
Yeah. So this is Clint. The man is Clint, and the dog is called Lucky. And the reason he's called Lucky is that Clint, he doesn't have any addiction issues or anything like that, but he told me that he had an awful accident, and it meant that he couldn't work anymore. So he went to a rescue shelter for dogs, and he met this lovely little dog, and he only had 3 legs. And so he called him Lucky, and he'd come from this awfully abusive family. And he told me that he was his antidepressant in life, which I thought was such a lovely story. And so they go everywhere together. He carries him in his backpack, and
he was, I mean, the guy Clint was his problems stemmed from having a serious debilitating accident, and then he was in all sorts of trouble paying for healthcare and all that kind of thing, wasn't he?
Yeah, definitely, exactly.
It kind of points out why,
he was actually on a housing scheme, a local housing scheme that was supporting him to try to get him into a house. But yeah, he was having a difficult time with that. But there are really positive schemes in Vancouver that help people, and that's one of the things about this area, is that it's not, so many people are very negative about the place, but actually there's so much good happening within this community. And even Andy here, he goes around the city and collects cans, and they had a can scheme where if you collect all of the cans and the bottles in the city, and also clean up while you're at it, which is obviously very good for the city, he can then get some money in return to eat and try to look after himself a bit. So it was interesting. It opened my eyes up to things like that, because I don't think we have things like this in Eastbourne anyway, and there's a lot of homeless here now at the moment. So.
There are some problems in Eastbourne, aren't there? Like a lot of seaside towns have problems with drink and drugs. I mean, these and this guy was selling these calendars, wasn't he, to raise money?
Yeah. So this is Donovan, and he was selling a calendar called Hope in Shadows, which was an amazing project that I discovered while I was there. I actually bought the book, and all of the contributions from selling the calendars and the books all went to the people in the downtown east side to help them either with housing or food or whatever it was. And so he was a low income guy in the area who, took up this job to sell these, and as a result, he got about 50% of the profits. So, it's a really good scheme. And the wonderful thing about Hope in Shadows is that it's also a really interesting photography project too, because the pictures in the project are actually taken by the people in the area. So they were given cameras to take pictures of each other. And they're really some really lovely pictures, and some really, documentary style images, and, some quite raw imagery there too. So really fascinating and really good idea to help the community. So
that's great. Barbara.
This is Barbara. Yeah. So we had a very good relationship in the end, because she was one of the first people I met. And she had an awful story of, some of her best friends drugged her years and years, like decades before, with this awful drug. And so she'd never been the same since. And then every time she saw me, she'd wave, and we'd have a lovely conversation. And so she was living in the area, and she had housing. It was great. But
When you went there, so before you went, you'd been quite ill, hadn't you? And you were advised not to travel there.
Yeah, I was advised by the doctors not to travel to Canada because I had a collapsed lung, and I couldn't not go because I tried to cancel the flight, and the company wouldn't cancel. And as a student, you know what it's like. You don't have any money. And I thought, well, this is my only chance to go to Canada to do this project. And I'd worked for so many months to do this. And so I couldn't not go. And I thought, oh, it's just a chest infection. It's just pneumonia. I'll be fine. And once I get there, I can get some medication if I need to, So I wasn't too worried about it, to be honest, at that time.
But actually, when you were there surrounded by people who had very serious health issues from homelessness, drink, drugs, and so on, you yourself were actually extremely ill, and you didn't realize this until you came back.
Yeah, exactly. I was very, very unwell. And I think it really hit me when I was out there trying to do this project for 5 weeks. I had this awful cough, and I knew that there was something wrong because I wasn't eating. And I love my food. So I knew, just having one meal a day when I was out walking around the streets doing this project, that, this didn't really add up to something more serious. And my cough got progressively worse. Sorry. Yeah. There's so many things about being ill that led to this moment, but there were so many symptoms. My hair started to go grey at the roots. Many things that I look back now and I think, goodness, there were so many things going wrong, really, that it's amazing. But sorry, what was your question?
No, I was going to say that you ended up in A&E when you came back, didn't you? Because you started coughing up blood.
I started coughing up blood, but that's when I really got worried. And my mum, she was crying and said, "Carly, this has got to stop now. You've got to go to A&E." So I knew at that point, I was quite terrified, but I knew at that point that I had to, go in and deal with this, whatever it was. So that's when I pretty much got diagnosed with Hodgkin lymphoma.
And what's that? That's a blood cancer. Is that right?
Yes.
But you had a tumor as well, didn't you? On a node or something.
Yeah, I had a large tumor, but it wasn't just in the lung; it was in the chest wall. So it sort of, it sort of gone through to different parts of the body. But it was
quite large, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was actually. They told me it was about the size of a grapefruit, and
that's big.
Yeah, it was quite horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you obviously had to immediately embark on treatment for this. It's seriously life-threatening illness.
So that's pretty much when I decided about 3 months later to start documenting my journey, and I decided that I'd do that through self-portraits. Mostly to document the changes visually, and then of course I discovered there were so many levels of change while I was going through the treatment.
But not just that, because there was a fighting chance that you weren't going to make it through the thing at all. So
they told me that I had
documenting the end of your own life. I mean, it could have been
definitely. And I think that was a really difficult decision. And I remember talking to my tutor at the time, Michael Bradley, who was massively supportive. And he was amazingly supportive of my decision. And I remember traveling to and from Middlesex to, scan images, and I was always quite unwell and I never knew what would happen. But it was it was a very interesting journey. And here you can see that you may not, if you don't know me, you wouldn't know that, but here I have actually lost quite a lot of weight, and my hair started to thin. So I'd gone down to about 7 stone here, whereas normally I was about 8.5, 9 stone. So it's not massively apparent here, but it it did look a bit.
You were. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
You do look thin there.
Yeah.
So is this is the treatment? I mean, what was the treatment is the question, I guess.
So this is me having chemo here. So this is a typical chemo day where I'd have all of my snacks. And
what does it take a long time?
Yeah, it can do. I think it used to take about 2 hours per session.
Yeah.
Maybe longer with all the bloods beforehand and then afterwards and all of the anti-sickness medicines. So yeah.
Right, so that's your little collection of survival stuff, is it?
Yeah. So there would be, people coming around with trolleys and coming into the ward and offering snacks, and so I'd often get, crisps, mini cheddars, and
should be on the mat. You should get them on prescription.
Yeah. And then, I'd have this big box. This big box here is the anti-sickness, but it came in this huge box and it just had one pill in the middle, which always used to make me laugh.
Just to let you know that it's serious.
Yeah. It was very odd. I still don't understand to this day why it came in such a big box.
Yeah,
and then
that's to justify the cost, I think.
Yeah, probably. And then I'd have my little mobile phone with me, which looks a bit ancient now. But yeah, so I tied up to all these different devices. So
yeah. You spent a long time in hospital, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I spent many months. Yeah, I spent the majority of my treatment, so about 6 months in hospital. Sometimes I get breaks so that I could go between home and, I could pop up to the university to scan or whatever it was. But
so
that would all...
Let's just get this straight. All the stuff that you've shown us so far, both in Vancouver and here, was all shot on film and medium format film at that.
Yes. Yeah, so I shot everything on the Pentax 6.7, so it's a bit of a beastly camera. It's quite big and very heavy.
It's not subtle, I'll give you that.
No, it isn't. So, it was a bit of a challenge to use it actually when I was going for treatment, because obviously I'd have days where I felt terrible and the side effects from chemo and the treatment. So often I'd set it up, and then I'd shoot it. But or I'd get passerby to push the shutter for me or something like that. But often I'd also use a cable release or something. But yeah, there were challenges with the project. It was a very yeah.
You look very pale in this one, I have to say.
Yeah, so I was often having chest x-rays because of the chest, so it had to be closely monitored a lot. So if I had any sign of infection, I'd be off to the x-ray room again. So yeah, I remember this corridor very well.
Yeah.
And also the other thing is, at this point, I think the amount of pills I was taking every day, up to 20 pills a day for various different things like gout. And I was on a huge amount of morphine. And then because I was, I didn't do well with morphine. So they gave me the alternative, which was OxyContin.
Which is what probably half the people on Vancouver were on.
Yeah, well, they were. There was a problem with many people that I met in Vancouver that had gone into hospital actually for a serious treatment or an operation, and then they'd got hooked onto OxyContin, which is kind of ironic considering I was out there talking to these people, and then I became very familiar with it myself. So yeah.
So what's this? Are you having a blood test or something? That line is significant, isn't it? The thing.
Yes, this is the PICC line. So I had this inserted before I started treatment. And this line goes in through the vein up round to the heart. It ends just by the heart. So the reason they do this is just to keep everything simple, so you don't have to keep putting in new
lines,
every time. So,
but isn't it also key to delivering the chemotherapy?
Yeah, definitely.
So it'll
it's standard
the system or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. You just have to be careful with it, because you can develop infections in the line if you don't keep it clean, or you have to be really careful when you're bathing or showering or anything like that, because it's very vulnerable to infection.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you really have to be careful about is getting neutropenia, which is something that I learned about when I had cancer, which horrified me to begin with. But then after a while, you just get used to it. It's where you're very vulnerable to infection, so you can then get sepsis from this. So
sepsis is alarmingly dangerous, isn't it? I mean, it can kill you very, very quickly.
Yeah, so I had it twice.
Wow.
And both times I was rushed into hospital, and very, very close. It was very close for me. The first time especially, it was very, very scary. And I think they said, we have to get these in the next hour, otherwise, So it's very scary.
Well, there's the Pentax.
Yeah, this is the big beastly Pentax camera. And so here I'm just showing my bald patches, which are starting to appear, and my hair's thinning. And losing my hair was one of the most difficult aspects of going through chemo, and also trying to document that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very worried about losing my hair, but I feared, I guess, that it would all come out in one go, but it didn't really. It took time.
There's another picture of your hair going, isn't there? Yeah.
Yes.
I remember seeing this. A colleague showed me this at the university. I found it very affecting. I think it's a very strong image. Yeah,
so I often would avoid washing my hair, because I was, again, very worried that I would lose it all in one go. But I did tend to lose much more of it when I'd washed my hair, and then when I brushed it as well. So there was so much in the bath here too. I've got other pictures of just hair everywhere. But I think this is, a sort of delicate image.
I think it's very hard. What I found very moving about it was that, as a young woman, to have your hair falling out, it's quite a tough thing.
Yeah.
I think you got pretty low about that, though, didn't you?
I did, actually. Yeah, I really feared going bald.
Yeah.
So this image is basically exactly that. I'd got to the point where I felt like I didn't really look or feel like the same person anymore. So it's very hard to put everything into perspective, and it raised lots of questions for me about my identity, and what's life all about, and this image is quite sad, really, for me, because I remember the feelings more than anything, because I couldn't even face the camera, and I didn't want to look in the mirror behind me, and this is me in my mum's bedroom looking out the window, and it's a very poignant image for me, very emotional, but I felt like I couldn't face myself, so this is literally that. I mean, it's not technically a great picture, but for me, it has a lot of deep emotion.
Yeah, I mean, your hair looks really scrubby there. It's
it was very, there were lots of bald patches. It was very stringy. It's almost like I was just holding onto it as much as I could, but then, I really should have just let it go.
Well,
but
what happened next? Yeah.
Yeah, so here we are. This is my hair. I asked my dad to shave it all off. I just said, look, I've had enough. please just get rid of it. And yeah, and he shaved it all off. And here it is. And I sort of kept it for a while. And I just, it's one of those weird things where, it's part of you. So you feel very attached to it. And
yeah.
And because I had these fears about it and worries, I wanted to photograph it as well, like that. And then when I finally let go of my hair, I really felt a sense of relief. And I thought, I don't know what all the fuss was about. I don't mind it. I look fine, my head's quite round.
You don't need to tell me.
So I feel like I just confronted all of my fears that had been leading up to that point. And it wasn't so bad at all. I'd even do it again. I'd shave off my hair. It's not that scary, it's very liberating. And I do like this image because I feel like I can tell that I'm quite defiant here. I'm not letting I'm kind of not letting cancer take over my life. I'm taking control. So yeah, it was a good moment.
It's great. It's great.
And then here is my my brother Lee and myself here. Lee is obviously a picture of glowing health. And I think I need to put my battery in. I'm really sorry. Very sorry.
Oh.
I seem to be running low. It must be the Zoom. Can you just bear with me? I'm very sorry.
Sure.
Just while we're waiting, Stephen, can I ask you where you
Yeah.
first met Carly, and was it around through the teaching or?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I taught her on that project, which, as I say, didn't go that brilliantly, but then that was right in the first year. I used to do a very basic black and white project that was like just 35mm, dev it yourself, print it yourself. And then I didn't teach her again on the course, but obviously, I'd heard from people that this cancer project was going on, and then when she left the university, we kind of lost touch, and then we bumped into each other a few years ago at a photography show. Are you plugged back in now?
I am very sorry about that, everybody.
No problem. Hand back to
I had almost a full battery, so I don't know how that's happened. That's very unusual. So, okay.
Yeah, you were saying about
yes.
I mean, you do look kind of,
Yeah.
It's odd here. You said eyelashes had fallen out.
Yeah, no, I actually drew my eyebrows on at this point. Yeah, I wasn't very well.
Then this marking on your body, that's from the chemotherapy, is it?
Yeah. So this started at the very beginning of treatment, actually. So because I was having blood transfusions before I started my treatment, I think there was a bit of a mix-up with the blood transfusions and the itching that I had, which was caused by Hodgkin lymphoma itself, but also by the morphine. So yeah, even the doctor said they're not quite sure how that happened, because I have marks all on my back too, and I wasn't really scratching very hard, but it's just one of those things
You've got a
pigmentation marks. Yes, I have. Here, on my back. And here I look like I've been completely attacked by a lion. I really do. And I don't really know, because it looks far worse than it is, but this has always stayed with me. It's never gone away. It sort of indented my skin. So yeah, it was one of those rare, weird side effects, I think, that happened. And then here I'm looking very puffy from all of the treatment, especially the steroids. And again, I've got the shrubs behind me, so they're a bit of a threat to my health.
Why is that?
I wasn't really allowed to have any salad or anything or be near live flowers because they were. I remember a friend of mine. She came into hospital to see me, and she bought this beautiful lavender plant, and the nurses said, "I'm really sorry, but you can't leave this in here." So that was a bit of a shame, but yeah. So lots of challenges at this point. And so here, this was my last day of chemotherapy, and I actually did develop neutropenia on this day. I had an infection in my PICC line, which then meant I was getting sepsis. So this was the second time I had sepsis. And so, yeah, I came into hospital. I was rushed into hospital again after I had my treatment, with a lot of problems. And then that's when I took this picture. So, it was a pretty bad day for me. I remember I was in a lot of pain, and yeah, so it's another picture that, brings back a lot of terrible memories, really.
A very haunting image, I think.
And then here's me in a wig, and I'd often resort back to my wig, through treatment. But then I think this was after treatment finished. So, sometimes I would wear the wig as a sort of comfort thing, just while my hair was growing back. And I'd also put on quite a bit of weight from the steroids at this point too. So, your weight's always going up and down, and yeah.
Yeah, steroids do that.
And then I did a diptych of the end of treatment, and about 6 months later, and I tried to get the images so that they were set in the same place, so that you could see the differences between, my stages of treatment and also how it affected me physically. And you can see, obviously, at the end of treatment, I was looking quite terrible. And then I'd started to put on a bit of weight and look a bit healthier.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, your legs look like sticks in that left-hand shot.
Yeah. Yeah, and I look, quite a bit bigger in the second one, but they were only about 6 months apart. So, and then here, this is much further along, where my hair started to grow back, and I got chemo curls. And
what are they?
Yeah, chemo curls are because my hair's always been quite straight. For some reason, I don't know why this happens, but a lot of the time, your hair grows back quite thick and curly and dark. So it was quite nice, actually, to have really nice, thick, dark hair and curly, which I'd never had before.
Yeah, your eyelashes are huge there.
Yeah, that was so everything was starting to come back. My whole body. It sort of, it felt like a renewal. I was just, everything was growing back, and my nails were coming back, and my eyebrows, and it was a nice sort of nice time.
And that was the end of it.
Yeah, so that was the end of pretty much what I documented of my time having Hodgkin lymphoma, and then I thought that would be the end of it. So. And
how long have you been clear of it?
11 years now, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But you're still monitored, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yeah. I think that's because I had a stage 4, so I think they monitor you for a bit longer.
So you submitted that then as a piece of degree work, is that right?
I did, yeah.
Did you get a decent mark for that or anything?
I did. I did. I got a first, which I'm very.
Imagine my surprise.
Well, I wasn't actually expecting it would. I just thought, because it was sort of in and out a lot. I thought, how can I make this a proper project? But yeah, it took a bit of time, and I did have a bit of extra time to complete it, so that helped as well. But yeah.
And then you hadn't really considered doing a master's, had you?
No, I hadn't. No.
Because of the cost.
Yeah.
But but then you were made aware of this scholarship.
Yeah, so definitely the master's was never an option for me because I didn't have the money available, and I thought, the only way I could do that is by getting a 7-day-a-week job and work around the clock, but that wouldn't make sense because I'd never be able to do the MA. So so my tutor, he advised me to apply for the Luck-Hille Postgraduate Award, and I couldn't believe I got it. I was actually really surprised, and this allowed me to do the master's degree and then go on to do a project in India, which I'm still massively thankful for to even now, because I don't think I ever would have been able to do that, and it allowed me not just to do this amazing project, but also just the time to study and use the amazing facilities at the university, which are incredible. I've never seen anything like them. They were amazing. So yeah.
So this is about elder abuse, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, so this project, Godhūlikāla, this is about elder abuse and abandonment, and I researched the project, and I went out to India, and I stayed mostly in the north of India. To begin with, I focused on the tribal villages, and I was seeking out cases of people that were being abused by their family. And the reason for that was that I'd met a friend of mine who made me aware of this issue. Mm-hmm. And it was such an alarming issue to me. I couldn't believe that India would have this sort of problem, on such a wide scale. So because it hit me at, such a deep core, I thought, I have to investigate why this is happening.
But it is unusual, isn't it? Because we always think of India as being one of those places where older people are revered and kept within a wider family group and all that sort of thing.
Exactly, and that's why I met Gautam, who is a very good friend of mine, who was very supportive on the project. He's an architect and caregiver, and he also made me aware of Help Age India, which are a charity. And through them, I discovered that at the time, so that was in 2014, about 50% of people that are being abused by their own children or their family members. But then a year later, it was about 50% higher than the previous year. So the statistics were quite concerning for me.
What is this? Is this people just abandoning them or trying to take property and things like that away?
So it's a variety of things. Mostly, partners are leaving people, like leaving their partners, taking all of, like, for instance, Ken M. Lam here. So he told me he was living in a government care home, and he told me that his wife left him when he had to have his leg amputated. And she took all of the gold and silver that they had. She took his land, she took his house, and he basically got kicked out of his own place. And her family took over his property and kicked him out. And so now he's living in a government-run care home, which was awfully sad. And he told me that he's just waiting to die. That's it now. His life is over. And I found this story very difficult. And now he's living in this government care home, which weren't really looking after him either. There were many people in the care home that weren't being properly treated or looked after. So then it's like, more desperate situation for these people. So they've come from a terrible place, but then they're going on to another terrible place. So, you know, this may have been an isolated incident where this care home was not very well run, and, you know, people weren't being looked after very well. But
we've had issues with that in this country too. So, I mean, it's not.
We do, and it's a worldwide problem, I think. And so I will just skip through here because I'm aware that we're time.
Yeah, there's quite a lot to get through still.
I like, but you know, sorry.
No, I just like him. I like the way he's a bit.
Yeah, he had health issues and was struggling to afford them, and he told me that his family had abandoned him because they were too busy. And he said they don't care, they don't want to know about his problems. There was a lot of stories like that, as well as you know, just people not receiving a pension, even the government pension that they were actually entitled to. So, you know, but it did become a much wider project about many different things. And also there are a lot of positive stories as well, like, you know, people that are being looked after, and, you know, the traditional Indian family.
Yeah.
It still exists. It's just that, you know, I think it's become quite westernized. And I think that a lot of those issues have come over to India, and things are changing quite rapidly. And I think that that's why I wanted to try and shine a light on this issue.
Yeah.
So the next project that I'm going to talk about was rather more circumstance than, you know, a plan. But my youngest brother, Joe, he was in and out of A&E a lot over about 2 years. And I started to get concerned when he lost a lot of weight very suddenly. And he was very young. So it seemed odd that he would be going into A&E so often with itching, and, you know, he felt like something was really, really wrong. And of course, he just got told, you know, this, just take away a cream and put it on your skin. It's some sort of dermatitis thing or something like that. And well, it turned out to be Hodgkin lymphoma. And so
you recognized some of the symptoms, didn't you? And you didn't.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Believe it.
Yep. I really did. And I think I thought, no, this couldn't possibly be, because it doesn't really, usually with this type of cancer, it's not hereditary. So
yeah, it's very rare for siblings to get it, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. That's what I've been told, and that's what people say. So I mean, yeah, I think yeah, to find out that he had the same cancer. He had stage 2B, so it was a different stage, but he did go through a very, very difficult time, a completely different time to what I went through. And we did discuss the idea of documenting him going through treatment, much like I did myself. And he was very welcoming about that. And it was very difficult because, you know, photographing my own cancer was, okay, that's fine. You know, I can do that. But photographing Joe was very different, because I felt like I couldn't help him. It was sort of, I was there for him, of course, you know, I'd go to treatment with him, and we bonded very strongly because of our shared experience. But
yeah, I mean, it must have been a support for him, because you've been through exactly these same treatments and procedures that he was having to do. Indeed, he has there the dreaded PICC line on.
Yeah, so he's got the PICC line here, and this is in the back garden at home. And he at this point, he knew that he was going to lose his hair, so he went a bit mad with the hair dye, which I admire him for, because I kind of wish I'd done the same thing. But yeah.
what would it be? Pink, would it have been?
But no, he was so brilliant. I mean, he really was. And you know, to go through it at an even younger age than what I went through, yeah, he was amazing. So I started taking portraits of him and trying to, you know, show the visual changes. And there's another one here with him in the bathroom, but he had started to lose his hair. You can see here at the top.
Yeah.
And he lost his hair a bit quicker than me, but he also had, you know, it wasn't easy for him. I remember it was a very difficult thing for me, but I didn't think it would be an issue for Joe, and it really was. And you know, because I always think, well, men always have short hair, and you know, it shouldn't be a problem, really, or you know, but
Well, you can carry off being bald or whatever, but the truth of it is, when I was Joe's age, what, he was 16 at the time, wasn't he?
yeah,
I had long hair, and the idea of anybody shaving them off would have been absolute anathema to me. I mean, I would have been mortified. So it's not.
Yeah, I think I just thought, oh, you know, this is one small hurdle, because you know, but I also learned a lot from watching Joe go through this as well, and the difficulties that he had, and yeah, that it was an interesting thing to see him go through, and
But
and here.
This is the dad and you moment replicated by
Ben. This is my
Ben.
brother, not my dad. Yeah.
You're one of your other brothers.
Yeah. So yeah, this is Ben, and he's decided to shave all of his hair off. And then, you know, there's lots of things that I documented about, again, cancer treatment, you know, going through endless scans and blood tests, and you know, the lists are endless. And here again is Lee setting up for the day with his work laptop in the ward with Joe.
Because Joe wasn't in Eastbourne, was he? He was.
No, this was the Royal Marsden in Sutton. So yeah, so we all had to travel quite a lot. Well, whoever sort of decided to stay with Joe through treatment. Yeah, sometimes he'd be admitted into hospital for a couple of weeks, and I often did that. But Lee would often come up because he didn't live too far away, just for the day or something. Yeah, and here, you know, again, common hospital scene, lots of orange picture.
You'd seen this before yourself. Yeah.
And then yeah, Joe back in theatre, and I can see here that he's had enough of it, you know, because at this point he actually relapsed. So you can see the scar on his arm. This is where he had the old PICC line, and he's then about to have the new PICC line inserted. So yeah,
is that so? I mean, what he's looking at something there.
Yeah, so there's a screen next to the bed. You can't really see it, but it was fascinating, actually, and I'm really glad that they allowed me to go in to take this picture, because it's almost like an ultrasound, sorry, monitor, and you can see where the PICC line is being inserted into the arm. So Joe was watching,
and further up.
Yeah. So they had to make sure that it's going in the right place before they, you know, they didn't do that with me, actually. I don't know if that's something they only do for, you know, at the Royal Marsden, but
yeah. But they can make sure that it's in the right place, I guess.
Yeah, I think they checked with an X-ray when I had it done.
Okay.
Yeah. And then this is a chemotherapy, which is attached to this machine, which is a very common machine. We have many names for it, and they change regularly. But yeah, it was always beeping the whole time, whether you're having treatment or not. So I'm sure many people would be very familiar with this machine. But so chemotherapy, you know, this is what it looks like. It's covered in a bag, and the reason it's covered is because it's light sensitive, and it only has a certain period of time before it can't be used anymore. You know, it sort of goes off. So yeah, it was very interesting to see it like that. And then you'd have whatever chemotherapy regime you're on, you get different things, you know, different bags. Sometimes you get a black bag, or, you know, a transparent bag, but yeah. And then further through treatment, Joe also had, you know, many side effects. I think he was on this machine for 24 hours a day for 2 weeks. So he was having quite intense chemo at this stage. And then later on, he went on to have a stem cell therapy, but this is him actually having the harvest. Stem cell harvest.
This is essentially where they take out stem cells, healthy stem cells,
Yeah.
store them,
Yeah.
and then put the chemotherapy in, which can really, really damage you, in an attempt to get rid of the
Yeah.
and
So
then put them back in to bring you back up again afterwards.
yeah, so after this harvest, this took about 4 hours, I think, and then these would be taken down to the lab and frozen for when he needs to have the stem cell. It's the stem cell transplant, I should say.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
This is an autologous stem cell, so this is different. So sometimes you get where somebody will donate.
So they're taking his own one.
Yeah, so this is his own stem cells. The machine was really interesting as well. How you can see some of the wires here, how the separation happened here.
Well, that's blood, isn't it, going through those little tubes?
Yeah. And some of it was so I think the orange was the stem cells and the red is so they're separating different parts.
Yeah.
And here too, you can see it, and you can see the stem cell machine in the background. It's very alien looking, you know.
What's this? What's that? Is it an orange?
Yeah, so here he's squeezing a ball because it helps to circulate the blood better, basically. And then here, he had to inject a thing called GCSF, which is it helps to keep his neutrophils high, so then he's not at risk of having neutropenia, which then leads to sepsis. So I think he'd inject himself a couple of times a day, and this is also something that I went through as well.
Why do you have to do it yourself? I would have assumed that you'd have a healthcare professional doing this for you.
Yeah, that's just a good question. I don't know. I don't remember why you have to do it yourself. I think because it's quite safe. I don't think you need to. I remember seeing him have, and I too, obviously in the beginning, I think the doctors or nurses would do it for us, but then over time, we take them home and do it ourselves. Yeah. And also, another common scene with cancer treatment is laying around in a room, many rooms. So, here he's preparing to have a PET scan, which is something that detects, you can see cancer cells in the scan. So you have to have a radioactive substance before you have the PET scan. So you have to sort of rest a bit before you go in. I think it's about 45 minutes to an hour. So, yeah, and it makes you feel very tired. So, Joe's having a little rest here. And then here he is going through the PET scan.
So this is made up of 2 frames on the 6-7.
Yeah. This is something that I made sort of more recently, but I kind of like the 2 ends of the image.
I like it a lot because I like the very sort of antiseptic quality of it, and the fact that there's very little color in it. It's I think it's a great pair of images. I think it works really well. I very much like it.
Thank you. So at this point, Joe had pretty much gone into remission after the scan, but then shortly after that, he relapsed again. And so it was a bit of a shock to everybody. So he'd relapsed twice through treatment, and he'd been going through treatment for a long time. So I think he'd had enough of it, and I completely understood the fact that, he wanted to stop doing the project, which I fully understood, and just to focus on getting well and, getting through the next stage, which ended up being to have the stem cell transplant, which was very successful. And I'm glad to say that Joe is now very well, and he's a lovely boy, and he's living his life, and he's now out of treatment. So
he's a healthy young man. I have met him, and it's good to know.
Yeah.
So then, right, your family, I mean, obviously, as we've seen, have had more than their fair share of misfortune, but at least you and Joe have both survived, and you know, please God, will stay healthy. But unfortunately, your mum didn't survive, and she died unexpectedly and very young in January of this year. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how you've also tried to come to terms with it?
Yeah. So she died very suddenly in January this year. She died from a hernia strangulation, and it was a massive shock to me and my 4 brothers and my dad and the extended family, because everybody knew that she had these hernias, but I don't think anybody realized that this could actually kill her. And even she kept saying this could happen, but nobody really thought it really would, especially not this soon. And I think it made it, for a long time after it happened, I felt like, it's another one of those things that's happened in my life, like so many of them, where I feel like I'm searching for a deeper meaning in life, and I wonder how I can use photography as a way to document my experience of this and try to put things into perspective, but also contemplate and wonder why something like this has happened. And I think, as I know from my previous projects, photography has helped me to sort of be a therapy in a way, and try to understand what's going on in life, and especially with something like this. And
yeah, I mean, it's it's a terrible shock, and I remember when this happened, and you were, and your whole family were devastated by it. It was
and it was because it did happen so suddenly. It wasn't like she was in hospital for weeks at a time. It just happened one night at home, and which is obviously a very awful thing to know that's happened. I wasn't actually there, but very hard thing to cope with and process. And so I decided to do a project about my mum. I sort of had started it a couple of years ago. I started taking portraits of my mum. She didn't really like having her portrait taken, if I'm honest, but she did allow me to take portraits of her. And this is one of those times where, she's in her bedroom, and she's sitting sort of awkwardly here because of the big hernias, and by this point in her life, she was massively deteriorating. Her health was very bad. So, she was almost housebound. She couldn't drive anymore. She was always in agony, and
what caused the hernia?
So 20 years ago, she had an emergency cesarean with my younger brother, Jesse. So there was a bit of a gap.
He's the youngest, isn't he?
Yeah, so there's a bit of a gap between us 3 at the top, and then there's a sort of 15, 16-year difference. My mum and dad decided to have more, and we were all leaving school. So, so Jesse was born via an emergency cesarean, and she had surgery, but it didn't really work, and she didn't have a mesh or anything. So the hernia just got worse over time. And I guess because she'd had so many kids, it was definitely harder for her to, keep the weight off or get rid of the weight that she'd put on from having the kids. And obviously with the hernia too, not so easy. So so over the years, she got worse and worse, and she wasn't, despite the healthcare that me and my brother Joe had, I felt like she didn't really have proper care, and as a result, she did massively deteriorate to the point where nothing could be done for her anymore. So I think that was quite difficult to come to terms with as well, and I think that also affected her quality of life, and brought on other issues that come as a result of that.
Yeah, I mean, the title of your project is part of it's. So you told me this is something that she used to say when she started to get worse and worse.
Yeah. Yeah, she did. She always said, "Where's my life?" And she would say it when she was down, or and or if she was having a bad time, she'd just sort of say, "Where's my life? What's happening to my life?" And it was very difficult to see her like that, and especially because she'd had quite a difficult childhood as well, and she was put into care quite young, and yeah.
Didn't
So I
have a
think that
good
was,
experience in care at all, did she?
no, she didn't. No, she actually was. She had some. She was she had some abuse issues in the care that she was given, so she wasn't really cared for at all. But another issue that's very current at the moment actually is childcare. So this is something that I'm also looking into with this project, because I know that it had such a deep impact on her life.
Yeah.
And actually here, the picture here of her hand is, she made homemade tattoos on her body. She has them on her arms, and
this was when she was still quite young, when she was a
yeah, I think she was a teenager when she did this. And actually she was always very embarrassed about them. So but she did allow me to photograph them, because I thought they were, an important part of this project, and about her and who she is, and her life. So, and I took other portraits of her, but this one is sort of very honest, really. I think, because she was so pretty and full of life, but she obviously was deteriorating, and her health was such a problem to her, and she didn't really like the way she looked anymore. And so I think that's sort of reflective here. You can see that she's not entirely happy with her life, and it's quite sad. And I just shot this in the back garden. And then after the funeral, we had a lot of floral tributes at the funeral, and we ended up taking them all back to their family house, and they were scattered all around the living room and the hallway, and my mum would have gone mad if she'd seen it. But this was on the table like this, and I quite like the scene, and the fact that lots of things have been moved in the room. Like here you can see the walls where there was something there previously, but things had to be moved to get all of the floral tributes in the room. So, and you've got my younger brothers, Joe and Jesse, above, and I really like that sort of scene. And then more floral tributes. This is a huge one that went on top of my mum's coffin. Beautiful, big thing, but we all wrote little notes, and this is my brother's Ben, his note, that I thought was very sweet. And then along with my mum's deterioration, also her room kind of had connotations of that too. Her room also deteriorated, and this is one of the first things I saw in her bedroom after she died, and it was very, very. Sorry?
So sorry. I was just going to say, I was thinking about my late mother, and when people are ill and housebound and stuck maybe in one room the whole time, it's very difficult to sort of keep.
Exactly. Yeah. And
you certainly can't redecorate or anything like
no,
that.
and that's the thing. So my dad's a painter and decorator, and he wanted to decorate my mum's room for so long, and she wouldn't let him in. She was just like, no, I don't want to leave my room for 2 weeks and go live in downstairs or live in another room, because she's comfortable there. So it's very complicated, and so even though my mum desperately wanted her room to be nice, and it never got done in the end, and it just got left. And obviously Joe being ill not too long before that, all the focus was on Joe, and so other things take priority. But it's just an interesting scene, and obviously very difficult to photograph shortly after my mum died, because I saw this, and this is her curtain, and and her clothes were hanging on the rail here on the radiator, obviously for the next day. And I thought, you know, this is very sad, and I can
Yeah.
lots of memories flood back, you know.
I find this a very poignant image, really, you know, because when you die suddenly, you always think you're going to have to get up and get on with life the next day, and it doesn't happen. I find this a very moving picture. It's extremely sad.
And then, you know, there were little details around the room like this. You know, she loved butterflies, and so it's just a picture of a butterfly on a wall. But
you had a few of them on the wall.
Yeah, she had a lot around the room, and but you know, obviously once she'd gone, it felt very strange to photograph what was left in the room without her. And I kind of wanted to tell her about it, you know, but I thought, well, I can't. So, you know, but this is kind of me documenting what's left of her and what represents her. And these are all things that are my mum, you know. Mm. So, yeah, it's a very interesting process. And there's
terribly difficult.
Lots to take in, and knowing what to photograph and how to photograph it as well. So,
yeah.
And then here you can see the butterflies in the background, and
I like this image. It says a lot about her and about her. She obviously didn't want to be photographed, but I think this is a very beautiful portrait. You know, in the light of the fact that she's died, I think it was very moving and really excellent.
That's very kind of you, thank you. But yeah, no, I mean, this project is becoming and widening into many different things, and so it's sort of an introduction to, you know, about my mum's life and her suffering, not, you know, with her illness, but also, I would like to develop this project into something about women who have hernias, or, you know, who opt to have cesareans rather than go through natural childbirth, you know, and look at people who have hernias. And I think it's an interesting subject, and I think that a lot of people don't know that there are such,
and with hysterectomies too, elective hysterectomies, or
yeah, that's true.
There's also a serious risk of hernia, and it's I don't think it's much discussed.
Yeah, so that's my plan with this project. And my mum always said that she wanted me to tell her story, and, you know, to try to talk about these issues, and you know, shed light on the fact that she's had so much suffering as a result of this, and nothing was really resolved. And so yeah, I think that there's many strands, and I think that memory comes into it, going back to places that my mum, you know, lived and grew up in, and but also combining that with a meaningful investigation about women, or, you know, men with hernias.
Yeah. Good.
I think that's everything I have to show.
That is it. Well, thank you. It's been fascinating. And
yeah, thank you so much, Carly, for sharing what's, you know, clearly been some very personal and clearly very emotional times for you, and I can see that's brought that back this evening. So thank you for being so honest and so open with what you've said this evening, and thank you, Stephen, for helping that conversation along the way. We're a little bit over time, but I'll just take one question from our audience here. So let me just scroll back on it. From Jennifer, who firstly is saying what beautiful and moving images you were showing, and this was about your own treatment, Carly. And then she was asking whether all the pictures were all the pictures shot with natural lighting. And was that
yes, they were.
And
there's an issue with that in shooting within the hospital. I think also with Joe's project, you have to sort of color balance everything afterwards. Because
I think that's
lighting is
definitely
so bizarre in hospitals.
Yeah, I think that's a big factor. That's why I tried to shoot it in natural light as much as possible.
Yeah. So we've got lots of very positive comments back here, coming in now, which I'll share with you after the meeting. But we're a little bit over time. So again, I think I'll just
sorry about that.
No, not at all. No, I think you had us all so engaged with it that I think that's incredible. So firstly, Carly, thank you so much, and congratulations on your award from the RPS. It's clearly well deserved, and thank you again, Stephen, for helping the conversation along and bringing your own insights into that. Thank you to Joe McDonald for arranging this evening. And as Joe said, we've got Ajuma and Ingrid Pollard who will be talking in September about Ajuma's work especially, and we'll share the link with you and also the recording for this evening's talk if you want to revisit some of it. So thank you to our audience, and thank you everyone for staying with us this evening. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.